There's a kind of darkness on the highway that no headlight can fight. A darkness that feels like it's watching you back. Truckers don't talk about it openly. The blackouts, the sudden silence, the nights when the world around your rig just disappears. But every driver who's lived long enough out here has faced that one moment when the road feels wrong. When the mirrors show shadows that shouldn't be there. When something sits in the passenger seat even though you know you're alone. These stories come from those nights. Before we start, take a breath, and if you're new here, hit subscribe. You don't want to be alone the next time the dark decides to follow you home. I've been running timber routes through the Cascade Range for going on 12 years now. You get used to the fog up there, how it rolls in thick off the mountains, how it sits low over the asphalt like something alive. You learn to trust your instincts more than your eyes. You learn when to slow down, when to pull over, and when to just keep moving no matter what you think you see in the mist. But that Wednesday night on Route 138, I learned something else. I learned that some things don't want you to keep moving. It was late September. I was hauling a full load of Douglas fir logs out of a mill near Tokati and heading west toward Roseburg. The kind of run I'd done 100 times before. Leaves were starting to turn. Air had that sharp bite to it that meant winter wasn't far off. I left the yard around midnight, figuring I'd beat the morning traffic and maybe grab breakfast at the truck stop off I-5 before my next pickup. The fog started just past Steamboat. At first it was nothing unusual. Just wisps curling across the road, catching in my headlights like torn cloth. But by the time I hit the stretch near Diamond Lake Junction, it was a wall. Thick, gray, suffocating. The kind of fog that makes you feel like you're driving through wet cotton. My high beams were useless, just bouncing the light back into my face. I switched to low beams and slowed down to about 35. The center line was barely visible. The shoulder had disappeared completely. The CB had gone quiet an hour ago. No chatter, no static, just dead air. That should have been my first warning. I'd been on that road for maybe 20 minutes, white-knuckling the wheel, when I saw him. First, I thought it was a deer, just a shadow standing on the shoulder, caught in the edge of my headlights. But as I got closer, the shape took form. A man, broad-shouldered, stocky build. He was standing maybe 10 feet off the road, both arms raised above his head, waving slow and deliberate like he was flagging me down. I eased off the throttle and hit the brakes, air hissing through the lines as the rig slowed. My trailer groaned behind me, logs shifting slightly in their chains. I pulled onto the shoulder as best I could, though I couldn't see where the pavement ended and the dirt began. I put it in neutral, set the brake, and leaned forward to get a better look. He was still there. Standing perfectly still now, arms at his sides. He was wearing old work clothes, flannel shirt, red and black checks, tucked into dark jeans held up by suspenders. His boots were caked in mud, thick and wet like he'd been walking through a marsh. He had a thick beard, dark hair under a wool cap. He looked like every other logger I'd ever seen working the timber camps up in those mountains. But something about him didn't sit right. I rolled down my window, cold air rushing into the cab, and called out, "You all right? Need a ride?" He didn't answer, didn't even turn his head, just stood there, staring straight ahead into the fog. I grabbed my flashlight off the dash, a big mag light I kept for tire checks, and opened the door. My boots hit gravel, and the sound felt too loud, like the fog was swallowing everything else. I left the engine running. Never shut it off on a lonely road, that's the rule, and stepped toward him, keeping the flashlight beam low so I wouldn't blind him. "Hey, buddy, you need help?" Still nothing. I got within maybe 15 feet of him when I stopped. He still hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. His face was pale, almost gray in the fog, and his eyes were open but empty, like he was looking at something 1,000 miles away. "You hurt?" I tried again, my voice quieter now. Then he turned. Not his whole body, just his head. Slow, mechanical. His neck twisted toward me, but his shoulders stayed square, his boots planted in the same spot. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my stomach drop. There was no recognition in them. No fear, no relief, no confusion. Just nothing. I took a step back. He turned fully now, his whole body moving in one stiff motion, and without a word he started walking. Not toward me, not toward the road, straight into the tree line. Hey, wait! I followed him. I don't know why. Maybe I thought he was in shock. Maybe I thought he was drunk or hypothermic. But I stepped off the shoulder and into the trees, flashlight cutting through the fog, boots crunching on wet pine needles. He was maybe 10 feet ahead of me, moving at the same slow, steady pace. Not looking back. Not stumbling. Just walking. Where are you going? I called out. He didn't answer. And that's when I realized. There was no sound. No wind. No rustling branches. No distant hum of my idling engine. No crickets. No owls. Nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind that feels wrong, like the world's been turned off. I stopped walking. The logger kept going, his shape fading into the fog, dissolving into the gray like he was never there at all. I backed up slowly, keeping my flashlight trained on the spot where he'd vanished. My heart was hammering now, breath coming fast and shallow. I turned and walked, then jogged back toward my rig. The fog seemed thicker now, pressing in on all sides. I couldn't see my truck until I was almost on top of it. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking. I sat there for a moment, engine rumbling beneath me, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Then I looked in my side mirror. He was standing right behind my trailer. Same spot, same clothes, same blank stare, like he'd never moved at all. I didn't think. I released the brake, threw it into gear, and hit the gas. The rig lurched forward, tires spitting gravel, and I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands locked on the wheel, and I drove. I didn't stop until I hit the lights of Roseburg. The sun was just starting to come up when I pulled into a truck stop off I-5. My hands were still shaking. I parked, shut down the engine, and sat there in the cab for a long time, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant hum of the highway. I didn't want to think about it, didn't want to tell anyone. But I needed coffee, needed to hear voices, needed to be around people. Inside, the place was starting to fill up with early morning drivers. I grabbed a cup, black, and sat at the counter. A state trooper was sitting 2 stools down, finishing a plate of eggs. I didn't mean to say anything, but the words came out anyway. You ever hear about anything strange happening on Route 138? Near Steamboat. He looked over at me, eyebrows raised. Strange how? I hesitated. Like, people who shouldn't be there. He set his fork down, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and turned toward me. You see someone out there? I nodded. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look skeptical. He just sighed, like he'd heard it before. Logger? He asked. My throat went dry. Yeah. He nodded slowly. You're not the first. We get reports every couple years. Always the same stretch. Always the same guy. Flannel, suspenders, muddy boots. I stared at him. Who is he? The trooper took a sip of his coffee, eyes distant. Logger named Roy Hatcher. Died in 1987. Hit by a log truck in the fog. Driver didn't even see him until it was too late. They found Roy's body in the ditch. Never found the driver. Truck just kept going. He paused, looking at me carefully. Some folks say Roy's still out there trying to flag someone down, looking for the truck that hit him. Or maybe looking for help he never got. I felt a chill run down my spine. I followed him into the woods, I said quietly. There was no sound. Nothing. The trooper nodded. Yeah, that's what they all say. He stood, dropped a few bills on the counter, and put his hat back on. My advice? Don't stop next time. He walked out, leaving me alone with my coffee and the low hum of the diner. I've driven Route 138 maybe a dozen times since that night. I've never seen him again. But every time the fog rolls in thick, every time the CB goes quiet and the road feels just a little too empty, I think about him. About the way he stared at nothing. About the silence in those trees. About how he was behind my trailer even though I'd left him on the shoulder. I still don't know what I saw that night. But I know this. Some roads remember, and some people never leave them. S1.1. I don't scare easy. 23 years on the road, you see enough to know that most things have explanations. Weird noises, loose cargo or a bad bearing. Shadows in your mirrors? Headlights reflecting off signs. Cold spots in the cab? Busted heater core. There's always a reason. But what happened to me on Highway 26 that September night? There's no reason for that. No explanation that makes sense. And I've tried. God knows I've tried. I was hauling a load of plywood out of Seaside, heading east through the Coast Range toward Portland. It was a run I'd done maybe 50 times before. The kind of route you could drive half asleep. 2 lanes twisting through dense forest, hardly any traffic after dark. Just you in the trees and the occasional deer stupid enough to wander into the road. I left the yard around 9 p.m., figuring I'd be at the distribution center by midnight, maybe grab a few hours of sleep in the lot before my next pickup. The weather was clear, cool. That crisp late September air that smells like rain even when it's not falling. My CB was quiet, no chatter. Most of the other drivers had already finished their runs or were parked for the night. It was just me and the road. I passed through Elsie around 10:30, grabbed a coffee at the truck stop, and kept moving. The highway climbed into the hills, winding through thick stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock. The trees pressed in close on both sides, branches reaching over the road like they were trying to touch. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, and beyond that, nothing but black. I was about 15 miles past the Saddle Mountain turnoff when I first heard it. First, I thought it was the radio. Some kind of interference, maybe a trucker on another channel bleeding through. But my radio was off. I leaned forward and checked the dial. Off. Completely off. The sound came again. Soft. Distant. A woman crying. I turned my head, listening. It wasn't coming from outside. It was too clear, too close. It sounded like it was inside the cab. Like someone was sitting right behind my seat, in the sleeper berth, sobbing quietly into their hands. My skin prickled. I glanced in my rearview mirror. The sleeper curtain was pulled back. I could see straight through to the bunk. Empty. Just my duffel bag and a couple of blankets. I told myself it was my imagination. Fatigue. A trick of the mind. I turned the radio on, let some classic rock fill the cab and kept driving. But the crying didn't stop. It got louder. Soft, broken sobs, the kind that come from someone who's been crying for a long time. Someone who's past the point of screaming, past the point of anger, just hollow. The sound made my chest tighten, made me want to pull over and help, even though I knew there was no one there. I reached back and pulled the sleeper curtain shut. Maybe that would help. Maybe if I couldn't see the empty space, I could convince myself it was nothing. The crying continued. I clenched my jaw and kept my eyes on the road. My speedometer read 60. My hands were tight on the wheel. I told myself to just keep moving. Just get to Portland. Get off this road. Then I heard her voice. A whisper, barely audible over the engine and the radio. He's still following me. My blood went cold. I snapped my head around, looking at the sleeper, the passenger seat, the floor. Nothing. No one. But I'd heard it, clear as day. A woman's voice, low and desperate, like she was speaking directly into my ear. He's still following me. I jerked my eyes to the driver's side mirror. The road behind me was empty, just darkness and the faint glow of my taillights reflecting off the wet pavement. Then I looked at the passenger mirror, and I saw her, a woman's face, pale, wet hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes wide and unblinking, pressed against the glass from the outside. But I was going 60 miles an hour. I shouted, don't even remember what, and my hands yanked the wheel to the right. The rig lurched, tires screaming, and I slammed on the brakes. The trailer swung out behind me, jackknifing, and the whole truck skidded sideways. I fought the wheel, trying to straighten out, but it was too late. The shoulder dropped off into a shallow ditch, and the cab tilted hard to the right, throwing me against the door. The engine stalled. The radio cut out. Everything went silent. I sat there for a moment, chest heaving, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The cab was tilted at a steep angle, the passenger side lower than the driver's. My seatbelt dug into my shoulder. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked at the passenger mirror. She was gone. I unbuckled, shoved the door open, and climbed out into the cool night air. My boots hit gravel, and I stumbled, catching myself against the side of the truck. I walked around to the passenger side, flashlight in hand, and shined it on the mirror. There were handprints on the glass. Small, delicate, smudged, like someone had pressed their palms flat against it and dragged them downward. And they were wet. I touched one with my fingertip. It was cold. Not just cool, cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. I pulled my hand back, wiping it on my jeans, and looked around. The road was empty. The forest was silent. No wind, no animals, just the faint ticking of my cooling engine. I climbed back into the cab, hands still shaking, and tried to start the truck. Took 3 tries, but the engine finally turned over. I managed to rock the rig back onto the road, straightened out, and kept driving. I didn't stop, didn't look in the mirrors, didn't turn the radio back on. I just drove. I pulled into a truck stop in Elsie around 1 a.m. I didn't want to stop, wanted to keep moving, get as far away from that road as I could, but my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't hold the wheel steady anymore. I parked, killed the engine, and sat there in the cab for a long time, staring at the dashboard, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. I'd seen her, heard her, felt the cold from her handprints on the glass. Eventually, I climbed out and went inside. The place was nearly empty. Just a couple of truckers nursing coffee at the counter and a kid working the register. I grabbed a cup, black, and sat down at a booth near the window. My hands were still shaking. An older guy, maybe 60, with a gray beard and a John Deere cap, sat down across from me without asking. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I didn't answer, didn't even look at him. He leaned back, folding his arms. "Let me guess. Highway 26. Past Saddle Mountain." I looked up. He was watching me with calm, knowing eyes. "How'd you know?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "You're not the first. Won't be the last." I stared at him. "Who is she?" He took a sip of his coffee, slow and deliberate, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Her name was Laura. At least that's what the old-timers called her. Happened back in the 70s. She was dating a logger guy named Ray. Real jealous type. One night, they got into a fight. She tried to leave, took her car and drove off. He went after her in his truck. A big logging rig loaded down with fur. He paused, eyes distant. He chased her for miles. Ran her off the road just past Saddle Mountain. Her car went into a creek. She drowned before anyone could get to her. They found her 3 days later. Never found Ray. Some say he drove off a cliff further up the mountain. Some say he just disappeared. I felt a chill run down my spine. "And she's still out there?" The old man nodded. "People see her, hear her. Mostly truckers. She's looking for help. Or maybe she's still running. Hard to say." I looked down at my coffee, my reflection rippling in the black surface. "I saw her," I said quietly. "On my mirror. We were going 60, and she was pressed against the glass." He didn't look surprised. He didn't look skeptical. He just nodded again. "Yeah, that sounds about right." He stood up, dropped a couple of bills on the table, and put his cap back on. "My advice? Don't drive that road at night. And if you hear crying, don't stop." He walked out, leaving me alone in the fluorescent glow of the truck stop. I've driven Highway 26 maybe a dozen times since that night. Always during the day. Never after dark. But sometimes, when I'm alone on a long stretch of road, when the radio's off and the only sound is the hum of the engine, I hear it again. Soft, distant, a woman crying. And I know she's still out there, still running, still looking for someone to save her from the thing that's been chasing her for 50 years. I don't stop anymore. I just keep driving. I've been running the I-5 corridor for 15 years. Portland to Sacramento, Sacramento to Eugene, back and forth like a pendulum. I know every exit by heart, every rest stop, every way station, every place where the road dips and your stomach drops for half a second. I know where the state troopers like to sit, where the deer cross at dusk, where the fog rolls in thick during winter. I know that road like I know my own name. So when I hit a detour I'd never seen before, I should have known something was wrong. But I didn't. Not right away. It was early December, a Wednesday night, maybe 11 p.m. I was hauling refrigerated produce. Lettuce, strawberries, the kind of load that doesn't wait, from a distribution center in Grants Pass heading north toward Portland. The weather was cold but clear, stars sharp overhead. The kind of night where you can see your breath even inside the cab if the heater's not running full blast. Traffic was light. A few cars, a couple of other semis, but mostly it was just me and the road. My CB was quiet except for the occasional burst of static. I had the radio on low, some talk show I wasn't really listening to, just background noise to keep me awake. I was about 10 miles south of Canyonville when I saw the signs. Orange and black, reflective arrows pointing right. Detour ahead. I-5 closed. Follow signs. I frowned. I hadn't heard anything about road work. No alerts on my phone, no chatter on the CB. But the signs looked official, clean, professional, the kind the state puts up. I slowed down, following the arrows as they guided me off the interstate onto an exit I'd never noticed before. The off-ramp curved to the right, dropping down into darkness. No streetlights, no businesses, just a narrow two-lane road that disappeared into the trees. I figured it was a temporary bypass, maybe an accident up ahead, or some late-night paving work. It happens sometimes. I'd loop around, reconnect with I-5 a few miles north, and be back on schedule. I followed the road. The pavement was rough, cracked in places, weeds growing through the edges. The trees pressed in close on both sides. Douglas fir, thick and tall, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out the stars. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the darkness, and beyond that, nothing but black. I drove for 5 minutes, then 10. No signs, no mileposts, no indication of where I was or where the detour was taking me. I reached for my CB, keyed the mic. Anyone got ears on? This is northbound hauler on a detour off I-5 near Canyonville. Anybody know how long this bypass runs? Static. I waited. Tried again. Breaker, breaker. Anybody out there? Nothing. Just the hiss of dead air. I set the mic down and checked my GPS. The screen was frozen. The blue dot that represented my truck was sitting motionless on I-5, right where I'd exited, like it hadn't registered the turn at all. I tapped the screen. It flickered, then went black. Come on, I muttered, pressing the power button. Nothing. The unit was dead. I grabbed my phone. No signal. I tried refreshing, restarting. The screen glowed, but the bars stayed empty. No service. No data. No GPS. I was completely off the grid. I kept driving. What else was I going to do? I couldn't turn around, the road was too narrow, and I was hauling a 53-foot trailer. I couldn't stop in the middle of nowhere with no way to call for help. So I kept moving, trusting that the detour would loop back to the highway eventually. But the road just kept going. Winding, twisting, narrow. The trees never thinned. The darkness never lifted. I watched my odometer. 15 minutes. 20. I should have been back on I-5 by now. Should have seen signs, lights, something. But there was nothing. Just trees. That's when I started to feel it, the wrongness. The way the air inside the cab felt heavier, colder, even though the heater was running. The way my headlights seemed dimmer, like the darkness was pressing in, swallowing the light before it could reach very far. The way the road felt endless, like I was driving in a loop, passing the same trees over and over again. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty. No headlights, no taillights, just the faint red glow of my own brake lights reflecting off the pavement. I was alone, completely alone. Then I saw it. Up ahead, maybe 100 yards, something in the middle of the road. A shape, dark, blocky. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. A truck. An old logging truck, parked sideways across both lanes, blocking the road completely. It was rusted, covered in grime and moss, like it had been sitting there for years. The cab was tilted slightly to one side, one tire flat. The door hung open, swaying slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel, and the headlights were still on. Dim, flickering, but on. I stopped about 50 feet away, set the brake, and sat there, staring. My pulse was loud in my ears. My breath fogged the windshield. I didn't want to get out. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, back up, get the hell out of there. But I couldn't. The road was too narrow. I'd have to move that truck to get past. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the door, and stepped out into the cold. The air smelled wrong. Sharp, metallic, like ozone before a lightning strike. The forest was silent. No wind, no animals, no rustling branches. Just the low idle of my engine and the faint creak of the rusted truck's open door. I walked toward it slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The truck was old, maybe 70s or early 80s. Forest Service green, covered in scratches and dents. The bed was empty, no logs, no equipment. Just rust and decay. I stepped up to the cab and shined my light inside. And froze. The interior was destroyed. The seats were shredded, torn apart, stuffing pulled out in clumps. The dashboard was gouged, deep scratches running across the cracked plastic. The steering wheel was bent, twisted like something had gripped it and wrenched it out of shape. But it was the ceiling that made my stomach drop. Claw marks, long, deep gouges dragged across the fabric lining, tearing through to the metal underneath. For parallel lines, over and over, like something had been trapped inside, clawing at the roof, trying to get out, or trying to get in. I backed away, heart hammering, and swept my flashlight across the rest of the truck. No blood, no bodies, no explanation, just claw marks. I turned and ran back to my rig. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door, locked it. My hands were shaking. My breath came fast and shallow. I threw the truck into reverse and started backing up. The beeping of the reverse alarm was the only sound in the world. I backed up for what felt like forever. 100 yards. 200. The logging truck disappeared into the darkness behind me, its headlights fading to pinpricks. Then nothing. I kept reversing until I saw it, the detour sign, the reflective arrows. I'd passed them on the way in, but now they were reversed, pointing back toward the highway. I followed them. The road widened. The trees thinned. And suddenly I was back on the I-5 off-ramp, the one I'd exited from. Like I'd never left. My GPS flickered back to life. The blue dot reappeared, sitting exactly where I was. My phone buzzed 3 bars, full signal. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Then I drove. I didn't stop until I hit Portland. The next morning I called dispatch. Told them I'd hit a detour near Canyonville. Asked if there was any road work scheduled. Negative, the dispatcher said. I-5's been clear all week. No closures, no detours. You sure? I asked. Positive. We'd have been notified. I hung up. I pulled up the route on my GPS, zoomed in on the area near Canyonville. There was no side road, no exit, nothing but forest and the interstate cutting through it. The detour didn't exist. I've driven I-5 100 times since that night. I've passed Canyonville in daylight, at dusk, in the middle of the night. I've never seen those orange signs again. But sometimes when I'm driving alone, when the road is empty and the CB is quiet, I think about that logging truck. About the claw marks. About the way the headlights were still on, flickering in the dark like a warning. And I wonder, if I hadn't backed up, if I'd kept driving forward, where would that road have taken me? I've been driving long enough to know the rules. You don't pick up hitchhikers. You don't stop for strangers on dark roads. You keep your doors locked, your eyes forward, and your mind on the schedule. The road is full of people with problems, and most of the time, their problems aren't yours to solve. But that night on Highway 101, I broke the rule. And I've been paying for it ever since. It was late October, maybe early November. One of those nights where the seasons blur together and the rain comes down so hard you can barely see past your hood. I was running a load of canned goods north along the Oregon coast, Reedsport to Florence, then up to Newport by morning. It wasn't a long haul, but the weather was making it slow. The kind of rain that turns your windshield into a waterfall no matter how fast your wipers are going. It was past midnight, maybe closer to 1. The highway was empty. No cars, no trucks, just me and the sound of rain hammering on the roof of my cab. The ocean was somewhere out there to my left, hidden in the darkness, but I could smell it. Salt and seaweed and cold, wet air. My headlights cut through the rain, 2 weak beams swallowed by the storm. The road curved and dipped, hugging the coastline, and I kept my speed down, both hands on the wheel. The CB was silent. Even the static had died. That's when I saw her. At first, she was just a shape on the shoulder. A dark figure standing in the rain, one arm extended, thumb out. I squinted through the windshield, wipers thumping, trying to get a better look. A woman, young, maybe mid-20s, long dark hair plastered to her face and shoulders. She was wearing a thin jacket, jeans, sneakers, nothing that would keep her warm or dry. She was soaked, completely drenched, and she wasn't moving, just standing there with her thumb out, staring at the road. I should have kept driving. Every instinct told me to, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she stood so still, like she'd been there for hours. Maybe it was the rain, the cold, the idea of leaving someone out there in a storm like that. Maybe it was just guilt. I eased off the gas and pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under my tires. My brake lights lit up the rain behind me, turning it red. I set the brake, leaned over, and unlocked the passenger door. She didn't move. I rolled down my window, rain immediately soaking my arm. "You need a ride?" I called out. She turned her head slowly, like she was waking up from a dream. Then she walked toward the truck. Her movements were stiff, mechanical. She climbed up into the cab without a word, pulled the door shut, and sat down in the passenger seat. Water dripped off her hair, her jacket, her jeans. Pooled on the seat, ran down onto the floor. She didn't look at me, didn't say thank you, didn't even acknowledge I was there. She just stared straight ahead through the windshield, hands folded in her lap. I waited for her to say something. She didn't. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Nothing." I tried again. "You got a destination? Someplace I can drop you?" Silence. I glanced over at her. Her face was pale, almost gray in the dim light of the cab. Her eyes were open, unblinking, fixed on the road ahead. Water dripped steadily from her hair onto the seat, a soft, rhythmic patter that mixed with the sound of the rain outside. I felt a prickle of unease crawl up the back of my neck. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She didn't respond. I put the truck in gear and started driving. What else was I going to do? Throw her out? She wasn't hurting anyone. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she'd been out there too long and the cold had gotten to her. I'd drop her at the next town, let someone else deal with it. I kept my eyes on the road, but I was aware of her. The way she sat so still. The way she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, or at least I couldn't see her breathing. The water kept dripping. The cab smelled like wet fabric and something else. Something faint and sour, like standing water in a ditch. I drove for maybe 5 minutes. The rain didn't let up. The road stayed empty. Then I glanced over at the passenger seat. It was empty. I jerked the wheel, nearly swerving into the oncoming lane, and slammed on the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop, air hissing through the lines. I stared at the seat. She was gone. Just gone. But the seat was still wet. Water still pooled on the floor. I could see the outline where she'd been sitting, the damp fabric pressed down in the shape of a body. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I unbuckled, climbed out of my seat, and checked the sleeper. Empty. I opened the passenger door, looked outside. Rain poured down, but there was no one. No footprints. No sign of anyone. I climbed back into the cab, soaking wet, and sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty seat. My breath was coming fast and shallow. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. She couldn't have jumped out. I would have heard the door, felt the truck shift, seen her in my mirrors. But she was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it. Fatigue, the storm, my mind playing tricks. I put the truck in gear and kept driving, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. 10 miles later, I saw her again. Same spot, same stretch of road, same pose, standing on the shoulder, thumb out, soaked to the bone. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't slow down, didn't stop. I kept my foot on the gas and my eyes straight ahead. But as I passed her, I looked in my side mirror. She was still standing there, arm extended, watching my truck drive away. And then she smiled. I didn't stop until I reached Florence. I pulled into a truck stop near the port of Siuslaw, killed the engine, and sat there in the cab, hands shaking, heart still racing. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. Everything felt normal again. But I couldn't shake the image of her. The way she'd disappeared. The way she'd been standing in the exact same spot 10 miles later. The way she'd smiled. I climbed out, legs unsteady, and went inside. The place was nearly empty. Just a couple of fishermen drinking coffee and a guy behind the counter, older, gray beard, flannel shirt. I grabbed a cup and sat at the counter, wrapping my hands around it just to feel the warmth. The guy behind the counter looked at me. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I didn't answer right away, just stared into my coffee. "Highway 101, I said quietly. "Between Reedsport and here. You ever hear anything about a hitchhiker?" He stopped, wiping down the counter. Looked at me carefully. "Young woman?" he asked. "Dark hair? Soaking wet?" My throat tightened. "Yeah." He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this. "You picked her up." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. She disappeared, right out of my cab. Then I saw her again. Same spot, 10 miles later. He set the rag down, leaned against the counter. Her name was Caroline. At least that's what people called her. Happened back in the 60s. She was hitching a ride north, trying to get away from a bad situation. Some guy picked her up. They got into an argument. He drove off the road. She died in the crash. He walked away. I felt a chill run through me. "And she's still out there?" "People see her," he said. "Drivers, mostly. She stands on the shoulder, waits for someone to stop. If you pick her up once, you're okay. She just disappears. But if you see her again," he paused. "If you stop a second time, you don't make it to morning." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Accidents. Breakdowns. Drivers just vanish. Nobody knows for sure. But it's been happening for 50 years. I thought about the way she'd smiled in my mirror. The way she'd been waiting. Still waiting. "I didn't stop the second time," I said. He nodded. "Good. Then you'll be fine." But he didn't sound convinced. I finished my run. Dropped my load in Newport. Picked up another one. Kept moving. I told myself it was over. That I'd gotten lucky. That I'd never see her again. But I was wrong. I see her all the time now. Not on Highway 101. Everywhere. Standing on the shoulder of I-5. On back roads in the Cascades. In my mirrors when I'm driving at night. Always the same. Always soaking wet. Always watching. She never waves anymore. She just stands there. Waiting. And I know someday I'm gonna stop. I don't know why. I don't know when. But I will. And when I do, I won't make it to morning. I've pulled over to sleep in some strange places over the years. Rest stops where the lights flicker and hum. Truck stops where the pavement is cracked and the bathrooms smell like something died. Empty turnouts on mountain passes where the only sound is wind through the trees and the occasional groan of your truck settling in the cold. You get used to it. You learn to sleep through noise, through cold, through the feeling of being alone in the middle of nowhere. But that night at milepost 97, I learned something else. I learned that some places don't want you to sleep. It was late April, maybe early May. I was hauling auto parts east on Highway 58, cutting through the Cascade Range from Eugene toward Klamath Falls. It was a run I'd done a dozen times before. Straightforward, mostly empty roads, not much traffic after dark. I'd left the warehouse around midnight, figuring I'd drive until I couldn't keep my eyes open, grab a few hours of sleep, then finish the haul by morning. By 3 a.m. I was done. My eyelids were heavy, my vision was starting to blur, and I'd caught myself drifting into the other lane twice. I knew the signs. I needed to stop. I was just east of Oak Ridge, climbing into the foothills, when I saw the turnout. A small gravel pull-off on the right side of the road, just wide enough for a truck. There was a green milepost marker, 97. The forest pressed in close on all sides. Douglas firs, thick and tall, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out most of the sky. It was quiet, dead quiet. No wind, no animals, just the low idle of my engine and the faint ticking of the cooling exhaust. I pulled in, set the brake, and killed the engine. The silence rushed in immediately, heavy and complete. I locked the doors, force of habit, and reclined my seat, pulling a blanket over my shoulders. The air inside the cab was cool but not cold. Comfortable. I closed my eyes. And then I heard it. A knock. Slow. Deliberate. 3 taps on my driver's side window. Knock. 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 I opened my eyes, heart jumping in my chest. I sat up, turned toward the window. Nothing. Just darkness. Trees. The faint reflection of my own face in the glass. I waited, listening. The silence pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. My breath was loud in my ears. I stared at the window, watching for movement, for a shadow, for anything. Nothing. I told myself it was a branch. Maybe something had fallen from one of the trees, brushed against the truck. It happens sometimes. I settled back into my seat, pulled the blanket up, closed my eyes again. Then I heard it again. Knock. 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 This time it was on the sleeper, right behind my head. I froze. My pulse hammered. I turned around slowly, peering through the gap in the curtain that separated the cab from the sleeper berth. The space was dark, filled with shadows. I grabbed my flashlight from the center console, clicked it on, and shined it through the curtain. Empty. Just my duffel bag, a blanket, a pillow. Nothing else. I swept the beam across the small space, checking every corner. Nothing. No one. The back window was intact, the curtain undisturbed. I turned back around, set the flashlight on the passenger seat, and exhaled slowly. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was hearing things. Fatigue. Stress. My mind playing tricks because I was alone in the middle of nowhere. I closed my eyes, and then I heard it on the roof. Knock. 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 Directly above my head. Slow. Deliberate. Methodical. Like someone standing on top of my cab, rapping their knuckles against the metal. My eyes snapped open. My heart was racing now, blood pounding in my ears. I sat perfectly still, barely breathing, listening. Silence. Then again. Knock. 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 Louder this time. Heavier. Not knuckles. Something harder. Something deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and rolled down the window, cold air rushing in. I leaned out, shining the beam up toward the roof of the cab. Nothing. No one. Just the dark outline of trees against the sky and the faint glint of metal. I pulled back inside, rolled up the window, and locked it. My hands were trembling. My breath came fast and shallow. I stared at the roof, waiting for the sound to come again. Didn't. The silence stretched out, heavy and oppressive. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my temples. The air inside the cab felt colder now, thicker, like it was pressing down on me. I didn't wait. I started the engine. The sudden roar of the diesel breaking the silence made me jump, but I didn't care. I threw it into gear, pulled out of the turnout, and drove. I didn't look back, didn't check my mirrors. I just drove, white-knuckling the wheel, my foot heavy on the gas. I didn't slow down until I saw lights. S5.1. There are things you see on the road that stay with you. A deer frozen in your headlights, eyes glowing white before it bolts. A car flipped in a ditch, emergency lights still flashing. The face of another driver passing you at 3 a.m., pale and exhausted, lost in their own thoughts. But what I saw on Highway 38 that night, that's something different. That's something I'll never forget. And I'll never understand. It was mid-November, a Tuesday night, cold and clear. I was hauling mixed freight south through the Umpqua Valley. Appliances, furniture, the kind of load that doesn't care when you deliver as long as it gets there. I'd left Drain around 11 p.m., heading toward Reedsport on Highway 38, a narrow two-lane that cuts through dense forest and follows the river for miles. The road is dark out there. No streetlights, no houses, no gas stations. Just trees, thick stands of Douglas fir and cedar that press in close on both sides, their branches forming a canopy that blocks out the sky. Even on a clear night, you can't see the stars. Just darkness and the narrow tunnel your headlights carve through it. There was no moon that night, the kind of darkness that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. My headlights were the only light for miles. The CB had been quiet for the last hour. No chatter, no static, just dead air. I had the radio on low, some classic rock station out of Eugene, but the signal kept fading in and out, replaced by bursts of static and silence. I was about 20 miles west of Elkton when I saw him. First, I thought it was a shadow, a trick of the light, but as I got closer, the shape took form. A boy, standing in the middle of the road, right on the center line. I hit the brakes, tires squealing, air hissing through the lines. My horn blared, echoing through the trees. The truck shuddered as it slowed, the weight of the load pushing me forward even as I tried to stop. He didn't move. I came to a stop maybe 5 feet from him, close enough that my headlights lit him up completely. He was small, maybe 10 years old, thin, wearing old clothes, a faded jacket, jeans, sneakers that looked too big for his feet. His arms hung at his sides, loose and lifeless. His head was tilted to one side, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear, and he was standing perfectly still. I sat there, heart pounding, hands gripping the wheel. My first thought was that he was lost, or hurt, or in shock. Kids didn't just stand in the middle of the road at midnight in the middle of nowhere. I rolled down my window, cold air rushing into the cab. "Hey!" I shouted. "Kid, get out of the road." He didn't respond, didn't even flinch. I honked the horn again. The sound was deafening, echoing through the forest. Still, he didn't move. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the door, and stepped out onto the pavement. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting, colder than it should have been. My breath fogged in front of me. The only sound was the low idle of my engine and the faint rustle of wind through the trees. I took a step toward him, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "You okay?" I called out, my voice softer now. "You lost." He turned his head toward me, slowly, deliberately, and that's when I saw it. No eyes, just empty sockets, black and hollow, like someone had carved them out and left nothing behind. The skin around them was sunken, gray, lifeless. His mouth hung open slightly, but there was no expression, no fear, no pain, nothing, just emptiness. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My legs locked. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand. He stared at me or through me with those hollow sockets, his head still tilted to the side. And then he started walking, toward me, slow, stiff. His legs moved like they weren't his own, like something was pulling him forward, dragging him step by step. His arms stayed at his sides, swaying slightly with each movement. His feet scraped against the pavement, a soft, rhythmic sound that made my skin crawl. I backed up, one step, then another. He kept coming. I turned and ran. I don't remember climbing back into the cab. I don't remember slamming the door or throwing the truck into reverse. All I remember is the sound of my tires screaming, the engine roaring, and the truck lurching backward as I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. I reversed for what felt like forever. 100 yards. 200. The truck swayed, the trailer fishtailing behind me, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. When I finally found a spot wide enough to turn around, a gravel turnout barely big enough for the rig, I cranked the wheel, shifted gears, and started driving forward. Fast. faster than I should have been going on a road like that. I didn't look back. Not right away. But eventually, I glanced in my side mirror. He was still there, standing in the middle of the road, right where I'd left him, lit up by my taillights, a small, dark shape in the distance. Watching. I didn't stop until I reached Reedsport. I pulled into a 24-hour truck stop near the coast, killed the engine, and sat there in the cab, shaking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. I could still see him in my mind. Those empty sockets, that stiff walk, the way he'd moved toward me like he wasn't alive but wasn't dead either. I went inside, grabbed a coffee I didn't drink, and tried to calm down. The place was nearly empty. Just a couple of truckers at the counter and a clerk half asleep behind the register. I sat in a booth near the window, staring out at the parking lot, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Couldn't. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and called the state police. It was 2 a.m., but I didn't care. I needed to report it. A kid in the road. Lost. Alone. Something was wrong. The dispatcher picked up on the third ring. Oregon State Police. What's your emergency? My voice cracked. Cleared my throat. I saw a kid on Highway 38, just standing in the middle of the road. He wouldn't move. Something's wrong with him. There was a pause. Can you describe the child? About 10 years old. Thin. Dark hair. Old clothes. I hesitated. He didn't have eyes. Another pause. Longer this time. Where exactly did you see him? Highway 38. About 20 miles west of Elkton. Right in the middle of the road. I heard typing on the other end. Then a long sigh. Sir, we've had reports of a child matching that description in that area for decades. Since the 1950s. My stomach dropped. What? We don't investigate anymore, she said quietly. We've sent officers out there. Multiple times. They never find anything. No child. No body. Nothing. I felt a chill run down my spine. Then what is it? We don't know, she said. But you're not the first person to call. And you won't be the last. My advice? Stay off that road at night. She hung up. I sat there in the booth for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. The coffee had gone cold. The sun was starting to come up, casting a pale gray light across the parking lot. I finished my run, dropped the load, kept moving. But I can't stop thinking about him. About the way he stood there, head tilted, listening. About the way he walked toward me, slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. About those empty sockets, black and hollow, staring at nothing and everything at once. I've driven Highway 38 a few times since then. Always during the day. Never at night. But sometimes, when I'm alone on a dark road, when my headlights are the only light and the world feels too quiet, I see him again, standing in the distance, watching, waiting, and I know, he's still out there, still walking, still looking for something, or someone. I've seen accidents. Bad ones. The kind that close highways for hours and leave black streaks on the pavement that never quite wash away. I've seen overturned semis, cars folded like accordions, tankers spilling fuel across 3 lanes. I've stopped to help when I could, called 911 when I couldn't. But what I saw on Highway 97 that night wasn't an accident. It was something else. Something that shouldn't exist. It was late March, a Thursday night, cold and clear. I was running a load of electronics north from Klamath Falls to Bend, a route I'd driven 100 times before. Highway 97 is a straight shot through high desert and pine forest. Long stretches of empty road. Hardly any traffic after dark. Just you and the stars and the occasional truck stop glowing in the distance. I'd left Klamath Falls around 9 p.m., figuring I'd be in Bend by midnight, maybe grab a few hours of sleep before my next pickup. The weather was good, the road was clear, and my rig was running smooth. It was shaping up to be an easy night. I passed through Chemult around 11:30, barely slowing down. The town was dark, a handful of buildings clustered around the highway. No lights, no movement, just the faint glow of a closed gas station and the silhouette of pine trees against the night sky. I kept driving north, the road climbing gradually into higher elevation. The air got colder. The stars got brighter. My CB was quiet, just static and the occasional burst of distant chatter I couldn't quite make out. I was about 10 miles past Chemult when I saw the glow. At first, I thought it was headlights. Another truck pulled over on the shoulder, maybe someone with engine trouble. But as I got closer, I realized the light was wrong. Too bright, too orange. A fire. A truck on fire. I could see it clearly now, maybe 100 yards ahead, pulled off on the right shoulder. The whole cab was glowing, orange and flickering, like it was engulfed in flames. But there was no smoke, no black plumes rising into the sky, just light. My heart kicked into overdrive. I eased off the gas, grabbed my fire extinguisher from behind the seat, and reached for my phone. I dialed 911, steering with one hand, eyes locked on the burning truck. 911, what's your emergency? I'm on Highway 97, about 10 miles north of Chemult. There's a truck on fire on the shoulder. I'm pulling over now. Is anyone injured? I don't know yet. I'm about to check. Stay on the line. Units are on the way. I slowed to a crawl, flipped on my hazards, and pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind the burning truck. I set the brake, grabbed my extinguisher, and climbed out. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting, colder than it should have been. My breath fogged in front of me, but the air didn't smell like fire. No smoke, no burning rubber or diesel, just the faint scent of ozone, metallic and sharp, like the air before a lightning strike. I took a step toward the truck, extinguisher in hand, and that's when I realized it wasn't burning, it was glowing. The flames weren't on the surface. They were inside the metal, inside the glass, like the truck itself was lit from within. The cab glowed orange and red, pulsing faintly, casting flickering shadows across the pavement. But there was no heat. I could feel the cold night air on my face, on my hands. No warmth radiating from the truck at all. I stopped. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. The phone was still pressed to my ear. Sir? Are you there? Yeah, I said quietly, my voice unsteady. I'm here. Can you see anyone inside the vehicle? I swallowed hard, took another step forward. The driver's door was open, hanging slightly ajar like someone had climbed out or tried to. I shined my flashlight into the cab, though I didn't need it. The glow from inside was bright enough to see. There was someone in the driver's seat. A figure, sitting upright, hands on the wheel. There's someone inside, I said into the phone. Are they conscious? I didn't answer. Couldn't. I took another step, close enough now to see through the open door. The figure was human-shaped, broad shoulders, head tilted slightly forward, hands gripping the wheel like they were still driving. But the body was wrong. Blackened, charred. The skin, or what was left of it, was cracked and peeling, darkened to ash. The clothes had fused with the flesh, melted into the body. Smoke seemed to rise from the figure, not into the air, but inward, like it was being pulled back into the body. I opened my mouth to call out, to ask if they were okay, if they needed help. And then the figure moved, slowly, deliberately, turned its head toward me. The face was burned beyond recognition, black and cracked, lips pulled back from teeth in a permanent grimace. The eyes were gone, just hollow sockets, dark and empty, and the mouth hung open wide, like it was screaming. But there was no sound, just silence. I froze. My breath stopped. My legs locked. The figure stared at me, or through me with those empty sockets. And then, slowly, it lifted one hand off the wheel, reached toward me, fingers blackened and skeletal, stretching out through the open door. I stumbled backward, dropping the extinguisher. It hit the pavement with a clang that echoed through the night. I turned and ran. I don't remember climbing back into my cab. I don't remember dropping the phone or throwing the truck into gear. All I remember is the sound of my engine roaring, the tires spitting gravel, and the glow fading in my mirrors as I drove. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I just drove, hands locked on the wheel, foot pressing the gas pedal as hard as I dared. I didn't stop until I reached Bend. I pulled into a truck stop on the north edge of town, killed the engine, and sat there in the cab, shaking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I could still see it, the glowing truck, the charred figure, the way it had reached for me. I climbed out, legs unsteady, and went inside. The place was nearly empty. Just a few truckers at the counter and an older guy sitting alone in a booth near the window. I grabbed a coffee I couldn't drink and sat down at the counter, staring at my reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser. The older guy looked over at me. He was maybe 70, gray beard, weathered face, wearing a faded flannel jacket and a trucker cap with a Peterbilt logo. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I didn't answer, just stared at my coffee. He stood up, walked over, and sat down next to me without asking. "Let me guess," he said quietly. "Highway 97, just past Chemult." I looked at him. "How'd you know?" He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this. "The burning truck." My throat tightened. "You've seen it." "No," he said, "but I know the story. Everyone who's been driving these roads long enough knows the story." He took a sip of his coffee, eyes distant. 1983, late spring. A tanker truck carrying diesel was heading north, same stretch of road. Driver's name was Ed Callahan. Good guy, been driving for 20 years. He was about 10 miles north of Chemult when something went wrong. Fuel leak, maybe a spark. The whole rig went up in flames. He paused. Ed didn't make it out. They said he was still in the cab when it exploded. Burned alive. Took them 3 days to identify the body. I felt a chill run down my spine. "And he's still out there?" The old man shrugged. "People see him. Not often. But enough. A truck on fire, glowing like it's lit from the inside. And Ed, still sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. Some say he's trying to finish his route. Some say he doesn't even know he's dead." He looked at me carefully. "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded slowly. He looked at me, reached for me. The old man's expression darkened. "Then you're lucky. Some drivers stop, get too close, try to help." He shook his head. "They don't make it to morning." I stared at him. "What happens to them?" "No one knows. They just disappear." Truck found abandoned. Doors locked. No sign of the driver. He stood up, dropped a few bills on the counter, and put his cap back on. "My advice? Stay off that stretch at night. And if you see that glow again, keep driving." He walked out, leaving me alone with my untouched coffee and the hum of the fluorescent lights. I finished my run, dropped the load, kept moving. But I can't stop thinking about him. About Ed Callahan, still sitting in that cab, hands on the wheel, trying to finish a route that ended 40 years ago. About the way he looked at me with those empty sockets. About the way he reached out like he was asking for help, or maybe asking me to join him. I've driven Highway 97 a few times since that night. Always during the day, never after dark. But sometimes, when I'm alone on an empty road, when the night is cold and the stars are too bright, I see it again. A faint glow on the horizon. Orange. Flickering. And I know, he's still out there. Still burning. Still driving. I've driven through a lot of forests over the years. The Cascades, the Coast Range, the Siskiyous. Trees so tall and thick they block out the sun even at noon. Roads that wind through darkness, where your headlights barely reach 20 feet ahead, and the only sound is the low rumble of your engine. You get used to the silence, the isolation, the feeling of being alone in a place where the world feels old and patient. But the Siuslaw National Forest is different. There's something in those trees, something that doesn't want you there. It was late October, a Friday afternoon, gray and overcast. I was hauling paper products from a mill near Florence, heading east toward Eugene. The main route would have taken me up Highway 126, but I knew a shortcut, a narrow back road that cut through the Siuslaw National Forest and shaved 20 minutes off my drive time. I'd used it a dozen times before, never had a problem. I should have stuck to the highway. I turned onto the back road around 3 p.m., though it felt later. The sky was low and dark, heavy clouds pressing down like a lid. The trees closed in immediately, towering Sitka spruce and western hemlock, their trunks thick and moss-covered, their branches forming a dense canopy overhead. The light faded to a dim gray-green, and the temperature dropped. I could see my breath fogging the windshield. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for my rig. Pavement cracked and patched, weeds growing through the edges. No other traffic, no houses, no signs, just trees stretching endlessly on both sides. My CB was quiet. The radio played low, some classic rock station, fading in and out as I drove deeper into the forest. I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. It gave me time to think, to decompress. About halfway through, I started hearing it. Whispers. Faint at first. So faint I thought I was imagining it. A soft rustling sound, like wind moving through leaves. I glanced out my window. The branches were still. Not a single leaf moved. But the whispers continued. I turned down the radio, listening. The sound was all around me now, soft, layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. Low murmurs, urgent, insistent. I told myself it was the wind, or the tires on the pavement, or the engine, something mechanical, something explainable. But the trees were dead still. I turned the radio back up, trying to drown it out. The station crackled, signal weak, but the music came through. Fleetwood Mac, Dreams. I focused on the road, on the steady yellow line disappearing under my hood. The whispers got louder. Not outside anymore. Inside. Inside the cab. I felt my chest tighten. My hands gripped the wheel. The voices were all around me now, layered and overlapping, rising and falling like a tide. I still couldn't make out words, but I could feel them. Feel them in my chest, in my bones, vibrating through my skull. I reached for the radio, turned it all the way up. Static blared. Then the song came back, distorted and warbling. But it didn't matter. The whispers cut through it, louder now, more insistent. I looked in my side mirror, and I saw them. Faces. In the trees. Dozens of them. Pale, stretched faces pressed against the bark. Eyes wide and unblinking, mouths open and moving, whispering. The faces weren't carved or painted. They were in the wood, like the trees had absorbed them, pulled them inside and trapped them there. Some were low, near the ground. Others were high up, 20 feet or more, twisted into the branches. Men, women, all ages. Their features were elongated, distorted, like they'd been stretched thin. Their eyes followed my truck as I passed, and their mouths kept moving, whispering. My heart slammed against my ribs. My breath came fast and shallow. I jerked my eyes back to the road, knuckles white on the wheel. "It's not real," I said out loud, my voice shaking. "It's not real." But the whispers answered. Not in words, just sound. Rising, louder, urgent, desperate. I looked at my speedometer. 40 miles an hour. I pressed the gas pedal. 50, 60. The truck groaned, the engine straining, the trailer swaying behind me on the narrow road. I checked my mirrors again. The faces were closer now, moving, sliding along the bark, following me, keeping pace. More of them, hundreds. The entire forest was alive with them. Pale faces emerging from every trunk, every branch, every shadow. And they were all whispering. Couldn't breathe. The air in the cab felt thick, heavy, pressing down on my chest. The voices were inside my head now, layered so densely I couldn't separate them. I felt them crawling through my thoughts, pulling at my mind. I slammed my foot on the gas. 70. The truck shuddered, the load shifting, but I didn't care. I just needed to get out, needed to escape. Then I saw movement ahead. Shapes stepping out onto the road. Figures, human-shaped but wrong. Tall and thin, stretched like the faces in the trees. They stood in the center of the road, arms at their sides, heads tilted. Watching, I leaned on the horn. The sound was deafening, echoing through the forest. They didn't move. I gritted my teeth and kept driving. Straight at them, At the last second, they stepped aside. Or disappeared. Couldn't tell which. I blew past them, my trailer swaying wildly, tires screeching. The whispers reached a crescendo. A roar of voices, overlapping, screaming, pleading, all at once. And then, silence. Complete, sudden, silence. I burst out of the forest onto Highway 126, bright afternoon light flooding the cab. The whispers cut off like someone had flipped a switch. The air felt lighter. The pressure in my chest released. I could breathe again. I kept driving, hands still shaking, heart still pounding, until I found a rest stop a few miles east. I pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there in the cab for a long time, staring at my hands. My ears were ringing, a high-pitched tone that wouldn't go away. I rubbed my temples, trying to clear my head, but the ringing persisted. It took hours before it faded. That night, I stopped at a diner in Eugene. I couldn't shake the feeling of those faces, those voices. I needed to know what I'd seen. There was a guy at the counter, older, maybe 70, wearing a faded duck sweatshirt and a John Deere cap. Local. I could tell by the way he sat, comfortable and unhurried, nursing a cup of coffee like he had all the time in the world. I sat down next to him, ordered coffee I didn't want, and after a few minutes I asked, "You ever hear anything about the Siuslaw Forest? The back roads through there?" He looked over at me, eyes sharp and curious. "Hear what?" "Whispers," I said quietly. "Voices. Faces in the trees." He set his cup down slowly, his expression changing. Not surprised, just resigned. "You drove through there today." I nodded. He sighed, looked down at his coffee. "That forest used to be a logging camp. Back in the early 1900s. Big operation. Dozens of men working the trees, cutting timber, hauling it out. Good money, hard work." He paused. 1902. Late summer. A wildfire tore through the camp. Started small, but the wind picked up and it spread fast. Too fast. The men tried to run, but the fire moved faster. Trapped them. 30 men died. Burned alive or suffocated by the smoke. I felt a chill run down my spine. "They never recovered the bodies," he continued. "The fire was too hot, too widespread. What was left? They just left it, buried under ash and new growth." He looked at me. "People say the forest remembers, that the men are still there, trapped in the trees. And sometimes when someone drives through, they try to speak, try to get out." I stared at him. "What do they want?" He shrugged. "No one knows. Maybe they're warning you. Maybe they're asking for help. Or maybe they just want someone to know they're still there." He picked up his coffee again, took a sip. "My advice? Don't go back." "I haven't. I take Highway 126 now, even if it adds time to the route. I don't care. I'm not going back into that forest. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone on a dark road, I hear it again. Faint, distant, just at the edge of hearing. Whispers. And I know they're still there. Still trapped. Still calling out. Waiting for someone to listen." I've driven through fog before. The kind that settles in valleys and hugs the highway, turning your headlights into useless glowing orbs. The kind that makes you slow to a crawl, white-knuckling the wheel, praying no one rear-ends you. The kind that sits heavy and cold, pressing against your windshield like it's trying to get in. But the fog I encountered on Highway 20 that November night was different. It wasn't just around me. It was hunting me. It was early November, a Tuesday night, cold and damp. I was hauling frozen goods eastbound from Salem toward Bend, cutting through the Willamette National Forest on Highway 20. It's a route I'd driven countless times. A winding two-lane that climbs through dense forest, crosses mountain passes, and eventually drops down into high desert. Beautiful during the day, isolated and eerie at night. I'd left Salem around 11 p.m., figuring I'd make Bend by 4 or 5 a.m., catch a few hours of sleep, and be ready for my next load by noon. The weather forecast called for fog in the mountains, but nothing unusual. I dealt with worse. The first hour was uneventful. The road climbed steadily, twisting through stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock. My headlights carved narrow tunnels through the darkness. The CB was quiet, just occasional static and a brief exchange between two drivers heading west. The radio played low, some late-night talk show I wasn't really listening to. Around 1 a.m., just past the town of Sweet Home, the fog rolled in. It started normal. Wisps at first, curling across the road, catching in my headlights. Then thicker patches, reducing visibility to maybe 50 feet. I slowed down, switched to low beams, and settled in for a slow crawl through the mountains. I checked my mirrors out of habit. And that's when I noticed it. The fog behind me was solid. A wall of white, thick and impenetrable, filling my mirrors completely. But ahead of me, the road was clear. I could see the yellow centerline, the reflective markers on the shoulder, the dark outline of trees on both sides. I frowned, glanced at my mirrors again. Still solid white. Looked ahead. Still clear. I told myself it was just the way the light was hitting it. Or maybe the wind was pushing the fog in a certain direction. It happens sometimes, weather moving in patterns you didn't expect. I kept driving. 5 minutes later, I checked my mirrors again. The fog was closer. Not just behind me anymore. It was creeping up on my trailer, swallowing the back end. I could see the rear lights glowing faintly through the white, but everything beyond that was gone. I felt a prickle of unease. I looked ahead. Still clear. No fog. Just open road and darkness. I sped up. From 40 to 50. The engine growled, the rig picking up speed on a straight stretch. I checked my mirrors. The fog was still there. Still creeping forward. Still gaining. My heart started to beat faster. I told myself I was imagining it. Fatigue. Stress. The mind playing tricks in the dark. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I sped up again. 60. 70. The truck shuddered. The trailer swaying slightly behind me on the narrow mountain road. I was going too fast for the conditions, but I didn't care. I needed to get ahead of it. Needed to break free. I checked my mirrors. The fog was right behind my trailer now. Inches away. A solid wall of white moving at the same speed I was. Not drifting. Not blown by wind. Following. My breath came faster. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The road curved ahead, and I took the turn too fast, tires squealing, the trailer fishtailing slightly before I straightened out. And then I saw them. Shapes. Inside the fog. Tall. Thin. Moving. At first I thought they were trees. Shadows cast by my taillights. But trees don't move. And these shapes were keeping pace with my truck. I could see them in my side mirrors. Long, dark silhouettes moving alongside my trailer, just at the edge of the fog. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They didn't walk. They glided, smooth and effortless, as if the fog itself was carrying them. I couldn't see details. No faces. No features. Just shapes. Human-shaped but stretched, elongated, like shadows pulled too thin. And they were keeping pace. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. 75. 80. The engine roared, the whole rig shaking, the road blurring beneath me. I didn't care about curves or cliffs or other drivers. I just needed to get away. The shapes stayed with me. I looked in my passenger mirror. They were there too. On both sides now. Dozens of them. Gliding through the fog, arms at their sides, heads tilted forward, moving in perfect unison. And the fog kept coming. It was against my trailer now, pressing against the doors, the sides, creeping up toward the cab. I could see it in my mirrors, a churning mass of white, thick and unnatural, moving like it had a mind of its own. I felt cold. Not the cold of the night air. A deeper cold. The kind that sinks into your bones and makes your chest tight. The cab temperature gauge read 68 degrees, but I could see my breath fogging in front of me. I cranked the heater up. It didn't help. The fog reached the cab. I watched in my mirror as it wrapped around the sleeper, crept up the sides of the windows. I could hear it now. A faint rushing sound, like wind, but lower, more like breathing. The shapes pressed closer. I could see them clearly now in my side windows. Tall. Impossibly tall. Their heads were level with my cab even though they moved at ground level. Their arms were too long, hanging past their knees. And their faces, I couldn't see their faces. Just darkness. Voids where faces should be. One of them reached out. His hand, if you could call it that, pressed against my window. Long fingers, thin and skeletal, splayed against the glass. The window fogged instantly where it touched, frost spreading outward in crystalline patterns. I screamed, yanked the wheel to the left. The truck swerved, tires screeching, and the shape pulled back, disappearing into the fog. But there were more. On both sides, behind, all around. And the fog was inside the cab now. Not literally, but I could feel it, pressing against my thoughts, pulling at my mind, whispering things I couldn't understand. I didn't slow down. Couldn't. I just drove, foot pressed to the floor, praying I'd make it out. And then, suddenly, the road dropped. I came around a curve and the forest opened up. The elevation changed, and I saw lights in the distance. Sisters. The town of Sisters, glowing softly against the darkness. I pushed harder. The engine screamed. The fog pressed closer. And then I was out. I crossed into the outskirts of town and the fog stopped. Just stopped, like it hit an invisible wall. I looked in my mirrors and saw it hanging there, at the edge of town, a solid wall of white churning and roiling but not advancing. The shapes were gone. I slowed down, my whole body shaking, and pulled into the first gas station I saw. I parked under the fluorescent lights, killed the engine, and sat there, breathing hard, staring at my hands. They were trembling. I climbed out of the cab, legs unsteady, and walked around to the back of the trailer, and froze. The entire trailer was covered in handprints. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, small and large, overlapping, smudged into the metal and frost. All of them facing forward, palms flat, fingers splayed, like something had been pushing me toward the town, toward safety, or pushing me forward so I couldn't turn back. I called the state police, told them I'd driven through fog and something had happened. I didn't tell them about the shapes, didn't mention the handprints. I just said I needed someone to check my rig. They sent a trooper. He looked at the trailer, walked around it twice, and asked me if I'd driven through a rainstorm. Fog, I said. Heavy fog. He nodded. Condensation can do weird things. Ice crystals, moisture patterns. But he didn't sound convinced. I asked if anyone else had reported strange fog on Highway 20. He didn't answer right away, just looked at me, then back at the handprints. Stay out of the mountains at night, he said quietly. Especially in fog. He left. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my cab under the lights until sunrise, watching the road, waiting for the fog to come back. Didn't. I've driven Highway 20 a few times since then. Always during the day. Never at night. Never in fog. But sometimes, when I'm alone on a dark road, when the night is quiet and the air feels heavy, I check my mirrors, and I see it, just at the edge of my vision. A wall of white, waiting, following, and I know that someday it's going to catch me. My name is Carl Brennan. I've been hauling freight for 19 years now, lumber, steel, refrigerated goods, whatever pays. I've driven through ice storms in Montana, blinding dust devils in Nevada, and fog so thick in Oregon you could cut it with a knife. I thought I'd seen it all. But what happened on Highway 22, crossing the Santiam Pass in the dead of night, still sits in my chest like a stone I can't swallow. It was late February. Cold. The kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and settles in your bones. I was running a load of plywood from Sweet Home to Salem. Nothing glamorous, just a routine overnight haul. My dispatcher had warned me about black ice on the pass, but I'd driven that stretch 100 times. I knew the curves, the grades, the spots where the wind cuts across the road like a blade. I left at midnight. The highway was empty. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just me, my Peterbilt, and the hum of the engine cutting through the silence. The trees on either side were dense, black silhouettes against a starless sky. My cab was warm, the heater humming steady, but outside it felt like the world had gone to sleep and forgotten to wake up. Around 2 a.m., I was deep into the pass. The road twisted through the mountains, climbing higher, the air thinning out. My CB had been quiet all night, not even the usual chatter from other drivers. That wasn't unusual for this hour, but it added to the feeling of being completely alone, like I was the only person left on Earth. Then the CB crackled. At first, I thought it was static, but then I heard it. A voice, clear and calm, cutting through the white noise. "You shouldn't be out here." I glanced at the radio, frowning. The green light was on. Someone was transmitting. I reached for the mic, pressed the button. "Who is this?" No answer. Just the faint hiss of static. I checked my mirrors. Nothing. No trucks behind me, no lights anywhere. The road stretched out black and empty. I shook my head, figuring it was some trucker messing around on the channel, maybe bored out of his mind a few miles down the line. I let it go and kept driving. But then the voice came back. Same tone, same clarity. "Turn around. Go back." This time, my grip tightened on the wheel. The voice didn't sound angry, it sounded urgent, like someone trying to warn me about a wreck ahead or a road closure. I keyed the mic again. "Turn around, why? What's going on?" Silence. Long, empty silence. I felt a prickle crawl up the back of my neck. I turned the CB volume up. Nothing but static now, soft and steady, like breathing. I glanced at my mirrors again. Still nothing. The road behind me was a tunnel of darkness. The road ahead was the same. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. I kept driving. What else was I supposed to do? Pull over in the middle of nowhere because some phantom voice told me to turn around? I had a delivery to make. I had a schedule. I wasn't about to lose a night's pay over some weird CB interference. But the unease stayed with me. My eyes kept flicking to the rear view. My ears strained for sounds that weren't there. The heater was still blowing warm air, but I felt cold. The kind of cold that starts deep inside and works its way out. 5 minutes passed, maybe 10. I was just starting to relax when the CB crackled again. This time, the voice was different. Louder. Angrier. I said, "Turn around." The words hit me like a slap. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I grabbed the mic, my voice sharper now. "Who the hell is this? Identify yourself." No answer. But the static changed. It grew heavier, thicker, like something was moving through it. And then I heard it. A low, guttural sound. Not static. Not interference. A growl. Deep and wet and inhuman, like something dragging air through a throat that wasn't made for breathing. My skin went cold. And then my engine sputtered. The rumble I'd trusted for thousands of miles stuttered, coughed, and dropped in pitch. My headlights flickered. The dashboard lights dimmed. I pressed the gas, nothing. The truck was still rolling, momentum carrying me forward, but the power was draining fast. I felt the incline pulling me back. I was on a climb, and without power I was slowing down. Fast. I coasted another 100 feet before I came to a stop. The engine was silent. The headlights were dim, barely cutting through the darkness. I sat there, hands on the wheel, breath fogging in the cold air that now seemed to seep in from everywhere. The CB hissed, loud, steady, like something breathing through the speaker. And then I heard it again, that growl. Closer this time, deeper. It filled the cab, vibrating in my chest, rattling in my teeth. I twisted around, looking out the back window. Nothing, just darkness. But I felt something watching, something waiting. I reached for the ignition, turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then nothing. Dead. My pulse hammered in my ears. I tried again. Click, click, nothing. The CB crackled. And through the static, I heard the voice again. Quieter now, almost a whisper. "You should have listened." That was it. I didn't think. I just acted. I threw the truck into neutral, released the brake, and let gravity take me. I rolled backward, coasting down the incline I just climbed. The truck picked up speed, wheels humming on the asphalt, cab swaying slightly as I steered in reverse. My eyes were locked on the rearview, watching the dark road unroll behind me. I rolled for what felt like a mile. Maybe more. My hands were shaking. My breath was short and sharp. The growl had stopped. The CB was silent. But I didn't stop rolling until the road leveled out and my truck finally slowed to a stop. I sat there for a moment, chest heaving, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Then I turned the key. The engine roared to life. Smooth, strong, like nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't wait. I turned the truck around and got the hell out of there. I drove straight to a truck stop just outside Salem. It was nearly 4 a.m. by the time I pulled in. The lot was half full, rigs parked in neat rows under buzzing yellow lights. I killed the engine, climbed out, and stood there in the cold, just breathing, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Equipment failure, bad radio interference, stress. But I didn't believe it. I walked into the diner, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and sat by the window, staring at my truck, trying to make sense of what had happened. An old-timer was sitting 2 booths over. Weathered face, trucker cap, flannel jacket. He'd been watching me since I walked in. Finally, he got up and came over. "You all right, son?" I looked up at him. I didn't know what to say. He sat down across from me without asking. "You come through the pass tonight?" I nodded. "You hear a voice on the CB?" My stomach dropped. I stared at him. "How did you?" "You're not the first," he said quietly. "And you won't be the last." He leaned back, folding his hands on the table. His eyes were steady, serious. Back in the 90s, a driver went missing on that stretch. Name was Eddie Trask. Good guy. Veteran hauler. He was running a late-night route, same as you. Dispatch lost contact with him around 2 a.m. When they found his truck the next morning, it was just sitting there in the middle of the road. Engine running. Lights on. CB still transmitting. He paused. But Eddie was gone. They searched for weeks. Never found him. Not a trace. I felt my skin prickle. His CB was still on? The old man nodded. They say it's still on. Some nights, drivers hear him. Trying to warn them. Trying to save them from whatever took him. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He stood up, tipped his cap, and walked out into the night. I never ran that route again. I don't care what the pay is. I don't care if it costs me a contract. I won't go back. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone on a long stretch of empty highway and the CB is quiet, I think I hear it. That faint crackle. That hiss of static. And underneath it, just barely, a voice. "You shouldn't be out here." I don't answer. And I don't stop.